A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This announcement kindly goes out to the chief guest and guest of honor to please make your way to the stage. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of the Almighty be on all of you, and a very good evening to everyone present here today. I gladly welcome you all to the Founders' Day of the All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Friends. In order to commence today's proceedings, I kindly request you all to please rise for the national anthem. In order to commence today's proceedings with the blessings of the Almighty, I next invite Al-Hafidh Al-Qari Abdullah for recitation of Qiraat.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والتين والزيتون البلد الأمين لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين صدق الله العظيم.
Yet again, Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of the Muslim League Youth Front, I extend a heartfelt welcome to each and every one of you gathered here today to commemorate this Founders' Day. Established in 1998, the All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Fronts was founded with clear and noble objectives: to preserve and promote the Muslim way of life, strengthen Muslim solidarity and brotherhood, uphold Islamic culture, and foster intercommunal amity and political harmony. Moreover, the Union seeks to cultivate a spirit of understanding and fellowship among Sri Lankans and its diverse communities. Whilst encouraging good citizenship, these principles continue to guide our journey to this day. To officially welcome you all to this special occasion, I now have the honor of inviting the National President of the All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Fronts, Mr. M.N.M. Sham Nawaz, to deliver the welcome address.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah. Today, we gather with immense pride and joy to celebrate a momentous occasion, the Founders' Day of the All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Fronts. It is a day to remember our roots, honor our founders, and reaffirm our commitment to the ideals upon which this esteemed organization was built. I extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you present here today. Your presence is a testament to the enduring spirit of our organization and the strong bonds that unite us. We are privileged to have with us today Deshamanya Kharu Jayasuriya, the former Speaker of the Parliament. Your presence, sir, adds immense prestige to this occasion. We thank you for honoring us with your valuable time. A special welcome is extended to our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Dayan Jayatilaka, an academic, writer, and the former permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations in Geneva, who will be speaking on the topic of unveiling justice, how the Palestinian context highlights global challenges for institutions and smaller nations. Your insights and wisdom are highly valued, and we are privileged to have you with us here today, sir. We also extend our heartfelt welcome to the venerable members of Buddhist Sangha, the reverend members of the church, the Hindu dignitaries, and the Islamic scholars, ulamas. The importance of interfaith harmony and cooperation, values that are deeply ingrained in our organization's ethos. A special and the High Commissioners representing all the esteemed countries present here today. Your presence signifies the global connections and solidarity that we strive to foster. Today's event also includes the presentation of the book Mati Sabhe Haras Upahara, a collection of speeches of condolence expressed in Parliament regarding on the passing of our late founder Deshamanya Alhaj M.A. Bakir Maka, a founder of the All Sri Lanka Union of Muslim League Youth Fronts. We are honored to have with us the individual who contributed to this publication and the spirit of collaboration it represents. We also extend our gratitude to and welcome to Mr. Intizam Meizan Mohideen, who support us sponsoring toward the publication of this book. As we celebrate our Founders' Day, it is important to reflect on the journey of All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Fronts. Our history and the various projects undertaken, highlighting the dedication and hard work of those who came before us. Today, we not only celebrate our past, but also look forward to the future. Let us rededicate ourselves to the principles that have guided us thus far: service, unity, and the empowerment of youth. Let us work together to build a stronger, more inclusive, and more prosperous Sri Lanka for all. Thank you once again for joining us on this special day. I trust that the proceedings will be both enjoyable and meaningful, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Extend our thanks to the National President of the All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Fronts, Mr. M.N.M. Sham Nawaz, for delivering the welcome address. Our union's vision also encompasses active engagement in religious, political, cultural, educational, recreational and social welfare initiatives that benefit the Muslim community across Sri Lanka. As we celebrate Founders' Day, it is not only fitting that we remember and honor our pioneers who laid the foundation for this movement. Let us take a moment to look back on their legacy. Thereby, I kindly request your attention to the screen for a short commemorative presentation.
ශාලෝනිය පිටදවසේ නායකයෝ යන්න පැරණි කියමනක්. එම කියමන අසත්‍යයක් බවට පසක් කරමින් සමස්ත ලංකා මුස්ලිම් ලීග් තරුණ පෙරමුණු සම්මේලනය තරුණ ප්‍රජාවේ නායකයින් බිහි කර තරුණ ප්‍රජාවෙන් නායකයින් බිහි කර අගමන විට සමාජයේ මෙහෙයවීමට පවා සමර්ථ වෙනවා. අද මෙම විශ්විත බව බිහි කළ එහි පුරෝගාමී අපි ආඩම්බරයෙන් සිහිපත් කරනවා. මුස්ලිම් ලීගයේ පිහිටුවන ලද්දේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ නිදහස් සටනේ සමාජිකයෙකු ලෙස මුස්ලිම් ප්‍රජාවට ආඩම්බර විය හැකි ආචාර්ය ටී.පී. චන්ද්‍රසේන සමස්ත ලංකා මුස්ලිම් ලීග් තරුණ පෙරමුණු සම්මේලනයේ මුස්ලිම් ලීගී නායකයෙකු වන ජබීර් කාදර්ගේ කාලයේදී පිටපු කථානායක දේශමාන්‍ය වාකිල් මාකර් එහි ආරම්භක නිර්මාතෘවරයා වුණා. එකමුතුකම සේවය සහ සංවර්ධනය තේමා කරගනිමින් ගොඩනැගුණු සංගමයේ සාර්ථකත්වයට කැපවූවන් අතර අප හැරගිය අය අද අපේ භක්තියෙන් සිහිපත් කරනවා. අපගේ නිර්මාතෘ දිනේදී අපි ඔවුන් සියලු දෙනාම අපේ හදවතින්ම අනුස්මරණය කරනවා. සමස්ත ලංකා මුස්ලිම් ලීග් තරුණ පෙරමුණු සම්මේලනය යනු නායකින් බිහි කළ තෝතැන්නක්.
First of all, I want to thank the All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Fronts for the honor of this invitation. I was very pleased to accept this, in particular because of the fact that this is a youth front.
විශේෂයෙන්ම දේශපාලන නායකයින් රැසක් එයින් රටට දායාද කර තිබෙනවා. එය හිටපු කතානායක දේශමාන්‍ය එම්.ඒ. වාකිරමාකරගෙන් ආරම්භ වී වර්තමානයේ ඉම්තියාස් වාකිරමාකර දක්වාම පැමිණ තිබෙනවා. දේශපාලන නොකිරීමට ඒ නිර්මාතෘවරුන් දැඩි ලෙස අධිෂ්ඨාන කරගත්තා. සිංහල දෙමළ ජනතාව අතර වෙසෙන මුස්ලිම් ජනතාව වෙනම දේශපාලන පක්ෂයක් පිහිටුවීම වාර්ගික සමගියට බලපානු ඇතැයි ඔවුන්ගේ අදහස වුණා. නමුත් මුස්ලිම් ජනතාව වෙනුවෙන් වෙනම දේශපාලන පක්ෂයක් ආරම්භ කළ අවස්ථාවේ සමස්ත ලංකා මුස්ලිම් ලීග් තරුණ පෙරමුණු සම්මේලනයේ නායකත්ව පුහුණුව ලැබූ අයද ඊට සහභාගී වුණා. මෙම සංගමය කිසිදු පක්ෂයකට අයත් නොවන බව මෙයින් පැහැදිලි වෙනවා. මුස්ලිම් ලීගයේ ක්‍රියාකාරකම් කොළඹට පමණක් සීමා වූද සමස්ත ලංකා මුස්ලිම් ලීග් තරුණ පෙරමුණ සම්මේලනය භෞතික සීමාවන් ඉක්මවා කටයුතු කළා. එහි නායකයෝද දිවයිනේ බොහෝ දිස්ත්‍රික්කවලින් තෝරාගත් අයයි. නිර්මාතෘවරුන්ගේ සිහිනයට සමගාමීව සමස්ත ලංකා මුස්ලිම් ලීග් තරුණ පෙරමුණ සම්මේලනය තරුණ තරුණියන් දසදහසකට නායකත්ව පුහුණුව ලබා දීමේ දැවැන්ත වැඩපිළිවෙලක් මේ වන විට ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙමින් තිබෙනවා. එම ඉලක්කය යටතේ මේ වන විට තරුණ තරුණියන් 700කට නායකත්ව පුහුණුව ලබා දෙනවා. සමස්ත ලංකා මුස්ලිම් පෙරමුණ සම්මේලනයේ ඉදිරි කාලවලදී ජාතිය ඉදිරියට ගෙන යා හැකි දූරදර්ශී නායකින් බිහි කරන බවට පූර්ණ විශ්වාසයකින් යුතුව මෙම සම්මේලනය ඉදිරියට ගමන් කරමින් සිටිනවා. අද දාරුණු
We now arrive at a pivotal moment in our agenda, the keynote address on the topic Unveiling Justice, how the Palestinian context highlights global challenges for institutions and smaller nations. Our keynote speaker this evening is a distinguished diplomat whose remarkable service record speaks for itself. He is the former permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations in Geneva and held numerous prestigious positions, including chairman of the International Labour Organization's governing body in 2000 and 2008, vice president of the United Nations Human Rights Council in 2007 and 2008, coordinator of the Asian Group at the UNCTAD. Notably, he played a vital role in defending Sri Lanka at the UN Justice during the nation's history. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Jayan Jaitilaka to deliver his address.
Thank you. Good evening, Reverend Sirs, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen. If I may start on a personal note, the young gentleman who introduced me spoke about my diplomatic career. One of the things I'm proudest about my stint as a diplomat, I'm not a career diplomat, but I have served in 3 places. One of the things I'm proudest about is that I was one of the ambassadors who was in Paris at UNESCO in 2011 when we faced down a warning delivered personally to us by US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who flew in from Washington DC to tell us that if we voted for Palestine, she wouldn't have a choice, it wasn't personal on her part, but Congress would cut off 60% of the funds to UNESCO. And I was in that group of ambassadors that voted for the entry of Palestine as a member of the UNESCO. The first time Palestine was voted through as a member of any UN body, you required a 2/3 majority, and we got a more than 2/3 majority in 2011 for the entry of Palestine. I'm glad I was able to participate in that. The topic I've been assigned this evening was not drafted by me. I had nothing to do with it. But I must say that it's a very complex and subtle wording. The wording is unveiling justice, how the Palestinian context highlights global challenges for institutions and smaller nations. Let's take it from the top. Justice for Palestine, especially for the Palestinian people of Gaza, is veiled, is hardly discernible. We see it as through a glass darkly, if I may quote from the Bible. So how do we get from this veiled justice, how do we get to unveiling that justice? I'm also in agreement with the committee that drafted this, because they use the term the Palestinian context. So it's not merely the Palestine issue or the Gaza war, it's the Palestinian context. Because every time we turn on the television, we see the horrors of what is being perpetrated wittingly in Gaza. And that provides a context for us as human beings, quite apart from our politics. When we recall these years, we will think of them as the years that we saw children being deliberately starved. Deliberate, not by natural disaster, but as part of a state policy. We will remember this time as a period in which our humanity was challenged. So it is indeed the Palestinian context. My generation lived through the Vietnam War. And we saw it on television, not in Sri Lanka. I was fortunate to be traveling with my parents quite often. So I was able to see the Tet Offensive on television as it unfolded, and then the victory of the Vietnamese in 1975. But I remember the Vietnam War from the time the bombers went north in 1964-65. So right through, we remember the images of the use of napalm, of white phosphorus. So Vietnam was our context at that time, and that included the protests in the United States, the killing of students at Kent State, and so on. Vietnam was the context. For us today, Palestine is the context. And as one who lived through, quite consciously lived through the Vietnam experience, I must say that, horrifying as it was, you cannot compare it with what we see every day of the suffering, the sheer suffering, the avoidable suffering of the Palestinian people of Gaza. As I said before, in our very humanity, how can we allow this to be perpetrated in our time? The topic also talks about the global challenges for institutions and smaller nations. So, justice, Palestinian context, global challenges, institutions, smaller nations. It's a tough topic to be covered in half an hour, but I'll try. The Palestinians of Gaza never got any justice. Whatever we may think of Hamas, and I do think that the attacks on the civilians, quite apart from the attacks on the Israeli military. But the attacks on the civilians on October 7th were quite abhorrent. I'm very well aware that those civilians were also, for the most part, settlers on Palestinian land. But still, especially the attack on the music festival was morally abhorrent and an act of terrorism. That said, I remember that when Hamas won the election in 2006, long before any acts of terrorism, the collective West, as it's now called, immediately imposed sanctions. Immediately. And as I had just become an ambassador at that time, I was horrified. And we had fought a terrorist movement and we had defeated it, but the injustice involved in a preemptive strike, in an immediate sanctioning. And that was before the internecine conflict between Hamas and Fatah, the PLO, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. There was violence, there were even killings. But from the get-go, Gaza was under sanctions, European sanctions. The same Europe that is now debating as we speak on whether or not to review the market access given to Israel. They're reviewing, they're wondering whether to review it. And I hope they do, and I hope they take a strong line. I'm happy that they're at least discussing it. But there was no such protracted process when sanctions were imposed, simply because the Palestinian people in Gaza had voted for Hamas over the Palestine Authority, over Fatah. Unlike the people in the West Bank. I mean, that's democracy. So, there was no justice, no fair play from the get-go. And I'm not even talking about justice for Hamas, I'm talking about justice for the people of Gaza. Now, once October 7th took place, and we know the context, we are very familiar with how the occupation is the principal reality. That does not justify each and every reaction to the occupation. But no discussion can take place without understanding that the overarching context is that of the occupation. But even after October 7th, things need not have come to the point that we are watching on television now, because there was another option. And I'm not talking about a pacifistic option. The United States of America presented the government of Israel with another way to go. The Biden administration, which has been faulted and quite rightly for being overindulgent towards Israel, however, made the effort in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. They sent in a top military team to try to ensure that the understandable and one might even say justifiable reaction of the State of Israel would be an anti-terrorist response. And the United States was willing to assist. It had also much experience after mistakes it had made in Afghanistan and in Iraq. It had also evolved certain methods of dealing with this problem. As is well known, though David Petraeus was not part of the team that went to Tel Aviv, his doctrine was one of the things the Americans reminded the Israelis of, which is when you take a bad guy off the table, make sure you don't do it with methods that create many more bad guys than the one you remove. But the government of Israel decided not merely to hunt down the Hamas team or Hamas itself, but to fight a wider war against the Palestinian people. And the American military team that went in there left and went back home, because it was very clear that the Israelis were giving them the cold shoulder. That is not what the government of Israel wanted to do. And what it wanted to do is what it is doing now. So you have ceasefire, which the outgoing Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration managed to get together for several weeks. The government of Israel changed the goalposts and did not want to go to the next stage. It wanted to prolong the preliminary stage. And they used that as a pretext to go back to not just full-scale war, but probably the most horrifying war that we have seen in our life. These are women and children. That is something that has been amply documented, and I believe we have never seen. And those who erect statues accusing Sri Lanka of genocide have yet to erect a statue. I'd like to see a statue come up in Canada for the against the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. I have yet to see that. I'd like to hear some Toronto mayor give a speech against the ongoing genocide. But what we are seeing is very deliberate, it's very open. There's nothing covert about it. Hospitals are bombed, residences are bombed. 70% of the casualties are women and children, mostly buried under the rubble. And now you see the policy which is being enforced for several months of starvation as a weapon of war on your television sets. You can see the children with the eyes bugging out and only the bones, and their mothers holding their bony hands at the bedside. This is genocide. Completely transparent. In the full view of the world. Nobody is stopping it. Nobody seems to care. I know I sound like an old guy, but when I was growing up, when I was a boy, when I was a teenager, this couldn't happen because the Arab street, as they would say, would put pressure on their governments. But there doesn't seem to be any such pressure, certainly not in the Gulf. And I don't see that happening in the Arab countries either. What we have seen is not just the genocide in Gaza, but also the bombing of Lebanon, where despite the fact that the Hezbollah was negotiating, Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated. And Hezbollah, if Hezbollah made any mistake, it was in trusting in their strategy that if they adopted restraint, good sense would prevail. They didn't understand that Netanyahu's government wanted to destroy them because they were an obstacle. And they were destroyed. And Lebanon, Beirut was bombed. And now Syria finds that though the Assad government is no more, Israel has occupied large parts of it. of the country. And is continuing to bomb, and he has occupied the areas going down from the Golan Heights. All of this is taking place quite openly. Quite openly. One day historians will look back and talk about this turn in global affairs that is taking place on many fronts. We see the tariff issues during the Trump administration, so many Ukraine, Russia, and the general understanding that the world system is undergoing a total change. But while this change is taking place, it is not a bloodless change. In the course of this change, in the context of this change, either as a byproduct or because people were paying attention to everything but the human aspect, the genocide in Gaza is proceeding. We may have to call it quasi-genocide or partial genocide because they may not quite finish off everybody, but what they have planned is well known. And the Israeli scholars themselves have exposed what the plan is to push the people out of Gaza or box them in so tightly that they can't survive. I mean, it's not only a question of pushing them, but literally of starving them. So, and that's a global challenge, not just for institutions and smaller nations, but for our humanity. Every institution is being challenged. Some of them have, some UN institutions have stood up, but the UN as a whole has been disappointing. We can see the alacrity with which the West responds in the case of Ukraine. One can understand that. And I don't want to take sides here, but let's face it, Ukraine is a war in which there are two sides. On the one hand, there's Ukraine backed by NATO, and on the other hand, there's Russia. But there aren't two conventional armies or two states fighting in Gaza. In Ukraine, 70% of the casualties on neither side are women and children. By the way, of those suffering the effects of the famine, and famine is what we are seeing in Gaza, 90% are children. Children. But that has not evoked the kind of, anything like the kind of international response in any of the institutions that the Ukraine crisis has. Now, if I may briefly wear my political scientist hat, I would guess that someday when all of us, especially the historians, write about the transformation of the world system these years, which is being talked about, one of the things that will be talked about is the loss of the moral high ground by the institutions. It happened with World War I, it happened with World War II, it has happened in modern history, where the institutions that were supposed to hold the line against barbarism did not. And philosophers, certainly after World War II, spent their time on trying to understand how this happened. How could you have the Holocaust? How could you have the World War? What happened to humanity? I think that that is going to happen when we look back on the times that we are living in. So that will contribute, though people think that let's get on with the major stuff like Ukraine and tariffs and so on, let the Gazans bleed to death or starve to death. We will see how that loss of morality, of basic humanity, on the part of those who could have stopped it. We really can't, but those who could have stopped it. How that eventually feeds in to the direction and uncontrollability of the changes that we are seeing in the world system today. Now, to come to well, if Israel can do that to us, it can happen to other places. And that's why if you don't fight for basic humanity in Gaza and stand up and at least shout about it, it may happen to you. But mercifully, since those of us who belong to small nations still have states which have not been shattered by outside intervention, we have more options than the poor people of Gaza. But this has implications for us all. Now, how do we then get out of this darkest of labyrinths? What are the lights that we can see? One is that the consciousness and the conscience of humanity has begun to respond, and it has been responding for some time. From the students in the United States of America and other parts of the world, but especially in the US, in the elite universities, who have been demonstrating solidarity and protesting and even being sacked from universities. You have a change in consciousness. You have the example, much celebrated, of Pope Francis and his concern over Gaza, which I hope and I think will be taken forward by Pope Leo XIV. So we have, while we do not have a murmur in the places that President Trump was visiting, which is a pity, because if that opinion had been communicated by his hosts, then President Trump might have thrown the weight of the United States behind stopping this carnage. But that didn't happen. But while that is the case, we know that throughout the world there have been an unprecedented outpouring of solidarity. In the Netherlands last weekend, hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating wearing red. So something is happening to the conscience and consciousness of people. Not only of young people, but especially of young people. That is one of the major factors that turned around the Vietnam War. The change in consciousness of the global youth, especially in the West, responding to what they saw was happening in Vietnam. So never underestimate the power of the people, especially in democracies. The people are changing, the consciousness is changing, and those youngsters who are demonstrating today will be the rulers tomorrow and day after someday. Those are the educated youth who will get there. But even before that, they will have an impact. They will have an impact. Finally, in Sri Lanka, I'm ashamed of what we in Sri Lanka have become. In Sri Lanka, we had a bipartisan policy. It had nothing to do whether you were center right or center left. Madam Madaraka suspended diplomatic relations with Israel. Though President Jayawardena even had Israeli military advisors here in the 80s, it must be remembered that when the PLO proclaimed a government in exile President Jayawardena of Sri Lanka was one of the first countries to recognize it. And during the presidency of Ranasinghe Premadasa, whom I am proud to have worked closely with, and my friend Imtiaz Bakir Maka was one of his young deputy ministers, Sri Lanka not only shut down the Israeli interest section, but when President George Bush Sr., redeeming a promise, I must say, that the United States made in the UN General Assembly in 1975, returned to the UNGA and sought and obtained the repeal of the Zionism is a form of racism resolution. Sri Lanka was one of the 25 countries that voted against that repeal. Now, it wasn't, a left-wing government. Of the 25, of course, most of the countries belonged to the Organization of the Islamic Conference. The others were ruled by communist parties, and Sri Lanka was the only country that was neither ruled by a communist party nor an Islamic state that voted against the repeal. And President Mahinda Rajapaksa, who belonged to the rival party, was very strongly pro-Palestinian, as we know. And I was very happy to have been able to work with him as well. We had this bipartisan consensus. But now, we have a situation in which Sri Lanka has become a rest and recreation spot for IDF soldiers engaged in what is almost certainly a genocidal war in Gaza, and who make no bones of the fact of their views, their behavior. Because Sri Lankan surfers out in Arugambe have been protesting against it's almost an occupied territory, according to them, according to young Sri Lankan surfers who've been speaking out on this. And there's even an award-winning movie about how some IDF soldiers came for sort of therapy after one of their comrades had been killed in a battle in, of all places, Syria. And there's a movie called Arugambe. And that's what Sri Lanka has become under the previous administration, I must say, of unelected President Ranil Wickremesinghe and Minister Manusha Nayak by the present government of President Anwar Kumar Dissanayake and Foreign Minister Vijay Thayer. We have Chabad houses in a country where there's never been a Jewish population. And Chabad houses are not mere synagogues, they belong to a particularly right-wing, ultra-Zionist religious offshoot. And they're provided security by the Sri Lankan state. So what are we going to do about that? I'm a Democrat, and I think that we should go back to the way we were in the 70s and the 80s, where the politicians, especially the Muslim community, the political leadership of the Muslim community is too silent on this issue, including in Parliament. In previous decades, it is the pressure from the democratic Muslim leadership on the major political parties of the day and the mobilization of voter opinion that helped the leaders who were themselves oriented towards Palestine to take the stance they did. But today we see none of that. There is silence. So I will conclude by urging, by pleading that within the Muslim community, pressure should be brought to bear on the mainstream political parties, leaders and parliamentarians to ensure that we in Sri Lanka do not abandon our tradition of solidarity with Palestine, and that we stand up and are counted as having done our duty as fellow human beings at this time of the torment of the people, the Palestinian people of Gaza. Thank you.
We'd like to extend our most sincere thanks to Dr. Dayan Jayathilaka, former permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations in Geneva, for those unwaveringly strong and profound words, and I certainly do hope that those words turn into action by everyone present here. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now honored to witness the launch of a commemorative publication that is going to be the highlight of today's ceremony. Mati Sabe Upahar, a heartfelt tribute to the late Deshamanya M.A. Bakir Makar, former Speaker of the Parliament of Sri Lanka. Mr. Bakir Makar's distinguished political journey began in 1947 with his election to the Berwala Urban Council, where he later served as chairman. In 1950, he became the mayor of Berwala and played a key role in uniting its east and west municipalities. He was also the first to propose the adoption of the Sinhala as the official language within the council. He served as Speaker of Parliament from 21st September 1978 to 30th August 1983, becoming both the last Speaker of the old Parliament and the first Speaker of the newly constituted Parliament of Sri Jawadarapura. Beyond politics, Mr. Bakir Makar was deeply committed to community service. He was the founder, president of the All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Fronts, vice president of the All Ceylon Muslim League, and chairman of the Berwala Mardana Mosque Jamaat until his passing. Mati Sabe Upahara compiles the condolences expressed in the Parliament upon his demise. It is significant to note that while parliamentary tributes are typically observed for a single day, Mr. Bakir Makar was honoured over 2 days, a rare gesture reflecting the immense respect he commanded across the political spectrum. Members of Parliament from both government and opposition, representing all ethnicities and religions, paid tribute to the late Speaker. Their heartfelt condolences were expressed without any political, racial or religious bias, underscoring his enduring legacy as a unifying figure in Sri Lankan public life. I now kindly invite Mr. Harris Fernando, former Deputy Principal of Royal College, who undertook the commendable task of collecting all the relevant Hansard reports and compiling them into this commemorative publication, to present our dignitaries with the copies. We will now proceed with the presentation of the books to the following dignitaries. Reverend Amagasmule Punaratna Thero, Father Philip Bandara, Vinayagan Gurukal, President of the All Ceylon Jamiatul Ulama,
He's here for his name also.
Chief guest, former Speaker and Honorable Sri Lanka Abhimanyu Karur Jayasuriya. Invited Speaker, Dr. Dayan Jayathilaka, President of the All Ceylon Muslim League Youth Front, Mr. Sham Nawaz, retired Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Nihal Sinivaratna, who contributed a foreword to the commemorative book during his tenure as Parliament Secretary under the late Honourable M.A. Bakir Makar, former Speaker of the Parliament. ambassadors and high commissions of foreign countries, including Indonesia, as well as a representative from the United States. Mr. Imtiaz Bakir Makar, representing the family of the late Honorable Alhaj M.A. Bakir Makar. Mr. Ranjit Samarkon, who designed the cover of the commemorative book. Former presidents of the All Ceylon Muslim League Youth Front Conference who rendered invaluable service, journalist N.M. Amin, attorney at law N.M. Shahid, Dr. B.M. Farooq, Mr. Uduma Lepe, and attorney at law Rashid M. Imtiaz, and attorney at law Luqman Shahabdi. And last but not the least, on behalf of all sponsors, Mr. Ishaq Mizan. In order to recognize this moment of time, we'd kindly like to invite Mr. Heras Philando on stage to join our dignitaries for a photograph to commemorate the launch of this prestigious publication. We'd also like to invite the former presidents of the All Ceylon Muslim League Front to stand on stage for this commemorative photograph.
Let's start.
You are
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. We now move on to another highlight of today's proceedings, the Chief Guest's address. Our Chief Guest is a respected statesman whose name is synonymous with integrity and good governance. He began his career by serving as a commissioned officer in the Sri Lanka Army from 1965 to 1972. Corporate and professional roles, including as chairman of the National Chamber of Commerce and director of the Export Development Board. He was conferred the title Sri Lanka Abhimanya in recognition of his contributions to Sri Lanka's export industry. In 1992, he was appointed Sri Lanka's ambassador to Germany with concurrent accreditation to Austria and Switzerland. In 1994, he entered politics, later becoming the 23rd mayor of Colombo, where his visionary leadership transformed the city and earned its recognition as one of the best managed cities in the SAARC region. His legacy includes a commitment to democratic values, clean governance and public service, with a career spanning roles as a diplomat, business leader, military officer, parliamentarian and cabinet minister. It is now my great privilege to welcome our chief guest, the Honourable Sri Lanka Abhimanya Karu Jayasuriya, former Speaker of the Parliament of Sri Lanka, to deliver his address.
Good evening to everybody. Ayubowan, Assalamu alaikum. Most respected members of the clergy, Buddhist, Islam, Hindu and Christian, National President of the All Ceylon Union of Muslim Youth Fund, today's keynote speaker, Ambassador Dr. Dayan Jayatilaka, former Minister Mr. Mithias Bhatti Mahaka, Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador for Indonesia, the representative of the US Embassy, members of the head table, ladies and gentlemen. I consider it a great privilege to be before you, because when this invitation was extended to me, I accepted that invitation with great respect, because I had the opportunity. I always had a very close friendship with the Muslim community that was further strengthened when I was the mayor. And it also so happened that today's occasion we are paying respect to a highly recognized Muslim leader, former Speaker, Mr. Bhatti Mahaka, is a model speaker and also who always believed in national unity, peace and harmony. And also your President happened to be working closely with me when I was serving the municipality. So today I have been asked to speak on leadership, legacy and courage to speak for justice. So let me begin not with a quote, but with truth. I have lived by 4 or 5 decades in public life. Leadership is not about holding power. It is about standing up when others sit down. It is about speaking even when your voice trembles. I stand before you today not as a former speaker or a minister or a mayor. I stand for the many communities that build this nation. Grateful, especially to Sri Lankan Muslim community, for the dignity and the strength you have shown time and again in the face of challenges, various challenges that the Muslim community face. This gathering today is more than ceremonial. It is generational. You represent the next chapter, and the founders whose vision we honor today were not merely leaders. They were risk takers, bridge builders, and truth tellers. I have often said, race is an accident of birth. From my childhood, I always believed that we never ask for my race or my religion. It is an accident. So it is not an issue that we have to fight for or shed blood. And this is the point that has not been understood in today's world. Humanity is a decision. In my life, I have sat with heads of states, political leaders, grieving mothers, with monks and imams, with protesters and presidents. I have learned this, our common humanity is more sacred than our political decisions. We Sri Lankans know what it is to hurt and we know what it is to heal. I still remember standing in Parliament after the Easter Sunday attacks, heartbroken, not as a politician, but as a father. And I remember the extraordinary restraint and compassion shown by many Muslim leaders at that moment. That is what national unity looks like. Not words, but conduct. And I will never forget that Muslim leaders were among the earliest patriots in our independence movement. They joined hands with Sinhala leaders and the Tamil leaders, and it was possible for us to jointly ask for independence. In other countries, when they have to shed blood, we were able to get that without much bloodshed, without sacrificing life. That's probably the reason why people don't realize the value of the independence that we are enjoying today. You have not only contributed to nation building, you helped define the very fabric of our national identity. Today the world watches Gaza, or rather chooses not to watch. We are witnessing in real time a tragedy that should take the conscience of any human being. Let me be clear. You do not have to be a Palestinian to feel pain. You do not have to be a Muslim to condemn injustice. You only have to be human. Every morning at 5:30, I start the day watching Al Jazeera. I start the day feeling sorry and crying from my heart about the deaths that are taking place. Not only the destruction, but the silence of those who should speak, the erosion of empathy, the normalization of humanity. I fear the world is not only losing life, it is also losing moral compass. As a small nation, Sri Lankans have always believed in standing on the side of the justice. Even when we do so alone, our voice may be small, but it must be principled. And to you, the young leaders in this room, I say, do not let your voice be silenced by distance or by fear. In my time as Speaker of Parliament, I faced moments of immense political pressure, threats, isolation, and even betrayal. But I chose to uphold the Constitution, not convenience. I chose country over party. That was not bravery, but it was my duty. When I stepped into public life, I never imagined I would preside over some of the most turbulent times in our democracy. I have no regrets because I believe that integrity always outlasts popularity. And you too will face such moments in your careers, your activism, your communities, moment where you must choose comfort or conscience. Choose conscience, that's my advice. This your union was born because a group of young Muslims didn't want to wait for permission to lead. They acted, they built, they questioned, and they did so with respect, discipline, and vision. You must do the same. The future will not be handed to you. You must shape it. But remember, anger is easy, action is harder, social media is loud, real leadership is quiet and sustained. You must listen more than you speak and act more than you post. Sri Lanka needs you not as passengers, not a conclusion. When I was a young man, I joined the army. That was in 1965, just after unsuccessful coup. Most of the young people here don't realize that we had two unsuccessful coups. I joined in the 65 for a short time. That was when the country was in national uncertainty. I have since served the public life for 40 years in several positions. And I can tell you with all my heart, there is no greater honor than to serve one's people with honesty, with your hands clean. No greater joy than to see young leaders rise. And no greater strength than to stand united even in the darkest times. As a Buddhist, I hold dear the teaching that hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love, this eternal law. And little words help Japan to be a single country instead of being divided. These words were uttered by the former President Jayawardena in San Francisco. I know even Islam too teaches, I quote, "Whoever saves one life, it is as if he has saved all of humanity." This is something in the Quran. These are not just religious verses, they are shared human values, and they must be the foundation of the country we build together. So today, let us honor the legacy of your founders, not just with words, but with courage, compassion, and unity. Ladies and gentlemen, may peace be upon you, may justice guide your path, and may Sri Lanka rise through your leadership. I thank you for the courtesy of your attention. Have a nice evening.
We'd like to extend our sincere thanks to Sri Lanka Vimania Karu Jayasuri, former Speaker of Sri Lanka's Parliament, for his inspiring words. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw to the close of today's event, we next have the vote of thanks by Z.F. Ahmed Farhan, the Acting Secretary General of the All Ceylon Union and Muslim League Youth France.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On behalf of the All Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Front, I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to everyone who contributed towards the success of today's Founders Day event. First and foremost, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to our Chief Guest, Deshmani Karu Jayasuriya, former Speaker of Sri Lanka, for your valuable presence and sharing your valuable insights with us. Our deepest thanks to our distinguished guest, Dr. Dayan Jayatilaka, for enlightening and thought-provoking lecture on unveiling justice, how the Palestinian context highlights global challenges for institutions and smaller nations. Your words have undoubtedly enriched our understanding and inspired us to reflect on these critical issues. Our gratitude extends to Reverend Ambagas Mulle Punjiratnatero, Father Philip Bandara, Vinayagam Kurukkal, Sheikh Falil, Sheikh Firdaus Manbai, for their participation and for symbolizing the spirit of interfaith harmony that is so vital to our society. We also thank to our ambassadors, high commissioners, representing all embassies and High Commissioner presence for their solidarity and support. A special thank you to Mr. Heiras Fernando for your efforts in compiling the book Metsabe Upahara, which captures an important part of our history. We also thank Mr. Ihtisam Mizan Moideen and Mr. Ziauddin Mizan Moideen for sponsoring the printing of this book. I would also like to thank Mr. M.N.M. Sham Nawaz, the National President of all Ceylon Muslim League Youth Fund, for his leadership and vision in organizing this event. Finally, I extend my sincere appreciation to the past presidents and the members of all Ceylon Union of Muslim League Youth Funds and the organizing committee and the volunteers who work tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event a success. Thank you once again for all of your presence, which made today's Founders Day a memorable and a meaningful event. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. We'd now like to invite Sheikh Firdaus for dua and salam.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أمن الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يعافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا. اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا وشفيعنا مولانا محمد صلاة دائمة مقبولة تعدي بها أن حقه العظيم. لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم سبحان الله رب العرش العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. نسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل اسم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا حاجة هي لك ربا إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وخطايانا كلها يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نهورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نهورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. صلى الله على محمد يا ربي صل وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.